There's not just pyramids in Egypt. There's pyramids in many other countries, in South America and in Mexico and so on. And most people don't know, now remains of pyramids have been found in many other countries. This is Japan, underwater, near the island of Okinawa. These are the remains of pyramids that went under the water a very long time ago. What's great about pyramids that went underwater is that when they do, you get organic growth on it. See, when you're dating things, and you're using carbon dating, when you do so, you can carbon date things that have carbon in it that is organic life. So, for instance, when they carbon date pyramids in South America and so on, they say, well, you know, we'll carbon date this guy that was buried beside it, or we carbon date, you know, this campfire, we carbon date what we find here, and then they extrapolate that these people were the builders of the pyramid. But when a thing like that goes under the water, then coral growth happens. And that is organic life, so you can carbon date at least when it went under the water. And when this was carbon dated, then it showed that this pyramid must have gone underwater 10 to 12,000 years ago, at the flooding of the last ice age. Now that would be when it went underwater. That is not necessarily when it was constructed. Eventually, I came across these things that were thought to have been popularized now as the flower of life. You can see them again, and so they're high on the pillars. And what's really amazing about this graph, this geometry that's imprinted on the granite, is that it's not cut, it's not etched into the granite, it's burnt into the atomic structure of the granite. It's burnt onto it like if it was laser burnt on the granite. And that poses a very large problem when you're thinking of 10,000 years ago, people going around burning stuff with lasers. Interestingly, when you take this geometry and you extrapolate it into 3D structures, now each circle becomes a sphere. The petals that we were discussing earlier, or the lobes we were discussing earlier, appears, and if you place a tetrahedron in each sphere, you get the 64 tetrahedron grid.
Wenn wir in diesem Bild den umfangsgleichen Kreis dazu zeichnen, dann sehen wir, dass er größer ist als der Kreis, den Leonardo gezeichnet hat. Aber das sind genau die zwei Kreise, die die Blume des Lebens umgeben.
Die Blume des Lebens ist ein uraltes, mystisches Symbol. Nicht nur in Ägypten ist es noch an einigen Tempelwänden zu finden. Auch in anderen Hochkulturen galt es als heilig. In seiner Gestalt verbirgt sich nichts Geringeres als die Blaupause der Schöpfung.
Wenn man die heilige Geometrie einmal verstanden hat, hat man eine Sprache gelernt. Und mit dieser Sprache kann man im Buch der Natur lesen. Alle Ebenen des Universums lassen sich mit der Geometrie beschreiben. Ich zeichne auf weißem Papier, weil ich kein Maß von außen einbringe, sondern dass sich alles aus sich selber heraus entwickelt. Und die Geometrie sagt, ein Zirkel, der sich öffnet, entspricht der Philosophie des Schaffens eines Raumes. Wenn ich also den Zirkel öffne und einen Kreis zeichne, schaffe ich einen Raum.
Am Anfang schuf Gott Himmel und Erde. So beginnt der Schöpfungsbericht der Bibel.
Und die Erde war wüst und war leer, und der Geist Gottes schwebend über den Wassern. Wir bewegen uns an die Oberfläche der Kugel und tun das, was wir schon können. Wir zeichnen noch einen Kreis. Und das Bild nennt sich dann, die zwei überlappenden Kreise, der erste Tag der Schöpfung. Und Gott sprach, es werde Licht, und es ward Licht. Und wenn ich mir anschaue, wie meine Augen aussehen als Lichtempfänger, könnte ich sehen, dass sie genau diese Geometrie des Lichtes nachvollziehen, um mit dem Licht in Resonanz zu gehen, um sie wirklich empfangen zu können, die Energie.
Mit jedem Konstruktionsschritt kommen neue Informationen hinzu und zeichnen so ein sich immer wieder neu entfaltendes, komplexeres Universum.
Und wenn wir genau gezeichnet haben, passiert schon ein kleines Wunder, nämlich der erste Kreis und der 5. Kreis schneiden sich in exakt einem Punkt zusammen mit meiner Ursprungssphäre. Und dort müssen wir natürlich hin, noch einmal zeichnen und erhalten plötzlich ein Muster, was in sich perfekt ist. Und das nennt sich Schöpfungsmuster oder Genesismuster, weil es sozusagen die 6 Tage der Schöpfung waren. Wie sieht das räumlich aus? In der Geometrie kann man die Kreise einfach verschieben und erhält plötzlich eine dreidimensionale Form und das Bild eines Toruses. Und damit die Urenergieform des ganzen Universums, wie das Universum gebaut ist und jede Pflanze, jedes Lebewesen, alles nach diesen Mustern existiert.
There are clues throughout Egypt that point to knowledge of high technology. A fascinating thing occurred when a chunk of stone recently fell off a lintel at Abydos Temple, and controversial images resembling a helicopter and other advanced-looking vehicles were revealed under the stone. It would seem that the images were covered in the distant past when things were changing politically in Egypt. Nowadays, Egyptian tour guides are explicitly instructed not to point these out to tourists. The Egyptological explanation is that it is multiple hieroglyphs overlapping from distant kings' inscriptions. But, like many things in Egypt, the explanation is still debatable.
You go to the sacred sites of the knowledge of the sun gods from the Chinese tradition. You go to the Forbidden City, and at the entrance of the city, typically you have the Sphinx. The Sphinx, both in Egypt and in China and other traditions, is considered the guardian of knowledge and is usually placed at the entrance, and they guard the knowledge. And the interesting thing about those statues that guard the knowledge, in the case of the Sphinx, it's thought that the knowledge is guarded under the paws of the Sphinx. But what's under the paws of this guardian? Well, when you look carefully, he's guarding the knowledge, which is a sphere with the lobes of the geometry of space embedded in it. And again, we find this information just percolating all around the world in these places where there's incredible buildings, incredible amount of knowledge. And, you know, sure enough, these traditions in China are linked to the knowledge of the I Ching and the yin-yang, and the yin-yang is the torus viewed from above, as we saw earlier. And then the I Ching is made out of 64 symbols, each symbol being made out of 6 sticks, right? And the way you define each symbol relative to each other is that the sticks are either broken or full. And usually they are arranged in a circle, like so, where 1 is in opposition to 64, 2 is in opposition to 63, 3 is in opposition to 62, and so on. And each one has the same number of full stick and the same number of broken stick, it's just that they're arranged differently between 2 pairs. Now, I was looking at this, and again, I was in my van decoding this a long time ago, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, if I take 6 sticks and I put them together in a geometry, if they're the same length, then the only geometry I can generate out of those 6 sticks is a tetrahedron. And I thought, okay, that kind of works, so maybe the code has to do with tetrahedrons. But what would it be about the broken sticks? What are the broken sticks about? What's going on? Smaller tetrahedrons, what's going on? And it took me a while to figure this out, but eventually I realized that when you follow the code of the I Ching, it goes 164, and they're in opposition. So if you took 1, this is 1 here, and then this is 64, and you put them together, then the sticks have to intersect. And that's why you have the broken sticks, because when they intersect, they get broken. Bang, 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 bang. And here's your star tetrahedron structure. And so you can continue to build the I Ching, okay, and follow the code and continue to build the star tetrahedron structure with the positive and the negative and the positive and the negative. And by the time you're finished, you will have a 512 tetrahedron grid, which is just happens to be the next fractal level from 64. So then you have all the fractal, progression. It's very important. I mean, these are fundamental beliefs that we have around the world. They're very important traditions that have very important sets of data that are telling us about the structure of space-time, that are telling us about the dynamics of space-time. The reason I'm mentioning all this is that there's evidence that there's people in this world that were able to do things in a manner that's completely different than how we do things today, and that exceed our capacity to do them today with all of our technology. Maybe, just maybe, because our technology is based on reactive, explosive technologies instead of contractive space-time curvature technologies, which would allow us to control gravitational fields and so on.
Another controversial object that Egyptologists merely deem impossible is the artifact commonly known as the Baghdad battery that generates a mild electrical charge. Similar ancient artifacts that match these objects have been found in Egypt. We can't say for certain, but it would appear that the Egyptians documented the existence of these artifacts as well. Recreations of these objects have been made and have successfully created electric current. Also noteworthy are strange representations of objects that resemble light bulbs, found in the crypts at Dendera. There was no natural light inside these underground crypts, but we see no soot from torches or oil lamps, the only lights we know the ancients used. Could the ancient Egyptians have had their own source of electrical power?
What are the biggest structures that modern man builds on the planet? The biggest, most awe-inspiring structures we create are hydroelectric dams. Why are we willing to invest such awe-inspiring amounts of labor and effort in constructing those? Because we know we're going to get a very valuable physical return in the form of electricity. And by comparison, I wonder if the ancient megalith builders weren't willing to invest such staggering amounts of resources by even smaller populations because they knew that they could get something very physical and worthwhile back from it. It makes sense that you could motivate an entire population to invest so heavily in building these structures, I think. And I don't mean to say by any means that this is the only purpose of the megaliths, but I think it's pretty clear that it's at least one of the primary or one of the important purposes for building these structures.
Megalithic sites occur all over the world. Is their placement random, or does the location of these sites reveal yet another hidden layer of ancient knowledge?
One thing I found looking at different megalithic structures over a few continents and numerous places around the world, overwhelmingly these places, the pyramids, the Stonehenges, etc. of the world, were placed on ground where an unusual type of geology naturally concentrates the regular daily natural electromagnetic fluctuations that occur everywhere on the earth each day.
You go into England, for example, the ley lines that cross England, the Michael line, which is hundreds of miles long, that crosses England, that carries this energy along that line.
It will therefore generate electric currents in the land called telluric currents in the straight geological sense of that word. And those occur everywhere on the planet.
But we know that this ley energy, this subtle energy, passes along these lines.
There are certain special types of geology that will magnify those several-fold. And that's where we found the megalith builders preferred to put their monuments.
And typically where lines cross, where you have more than one line intersecting, temples were often built.
These are called conductivity discontinuities, which sounds highly technical, but it's merely the place where one area of ground that has a good ability to conduct electricity meets another area of ground that has a lesser ability to conduct these natural electric currents. And wherever you have a changing magnetic field occurring, you are generating electric current in anything present that will conduct electricity. It's a simple principle of physics known as induction, and it's a universal. It's interesting to me that those outer stones were the ones that they cut so precisely that all these thousands of years later you still can't get a razor blade between them. Because basically what we've got here is we've got a situation with a highly electrically conductive core of those pyramids wrapped in what is effectively a very effective insulator. Why the granite in the passageways, you know? And so of course I'm thinking from an electrical point of view and a physical point of view. Is there anything special about granite? And yeah, there is. Granite is slightly radioactive, and it will ionize or electrify the air. It releases radon gas, which is radioactive. So you have these sealed shafts with granite linings, and I wonder if it wasn't designed to keep an electrical charge present in those shafts. They were built exactly like, if you will, an insulated wire, only more so because you've got all the charge in the ground that's spread across the base, concentrated all the way up into this tiny spot at the top. In Egypt, you do have a similar situation to England in that you have limestone aquifers under the monuments.
An aquifer is an underground layer of porous, water-bearing rock. Water flows through the aquifers as rainfall, or when rivers and lakes flood, the water drains into them.
And movement of water through limestone or chalk aquifers is known to produce electrical charge by two different processes that are self-reinforcing. And I've personally measured this for a week at a stretch at Silbury Hill in England, for example. Right before and after thunderstorms, as the water is sinking into the ground, we measured the increase in ground current, the change in the magnetic field as that happened, etc. And in Egypt, you had the Nile crashing, dropping every year and then flooding again. And that movement of water up and down through the layers of limestone would generate electrical charge. Flowing water generates at least a mild electrical charge, which means it generates an electric current, which means it generates a magnetic field as well. So if you were looking to give an electrical charge, a little boost to, say, a mound or something like that, it makes a lot of sense to have it at a minimum running water. And in fact, at Tiwanaku on the south shore of Lake Titicaca, their biggest monument, the Akapana Pyramid, was was terraced in such a way as to have the water come down in waterfalls that alternated outside the pyramid, inside the pyramid. But that kind of falling water generates enough electric charge that one of the common school physics experiments is you can, in your own sink at home, if you could divide the stream of water coming out of your faucet into two separate streams, you can take a little LED indicator light and put it between the streams, and it'll generate enough electricity that maybe every 20 seconds or so the light bulb will come on. And then the question is, did some of those layers of limestone run up the Giza plateau? And they did, and they did, come up and to the surface underneath where some of the pyramids are located. The idea would be that it would be the rising and falling of the Nile that would produce this electric ground current by moving through the different layers of the limestone aquifer. And when there was a dip, say, in that supply, maybe that's when the ionized air in the granite shafts and galleries could help keep the process going, if you will. So you've got this concentration of negative charge from the ground at the peak of the pyramid or mound, and a concentration of positive charge above it. And if those two become strong enough, you can start to get brush discharge, which would mean it would glow, like ball lightning, for example. It's a theory.
Invisible, subtle energy occurs around us all the time and is measurable by science.
We had noticed a lot of people showing us photographs from megalithic sites that disproportionately often seem to have these balls of light in there, usually flash photos.
Orbs are often written off as dust or other particles in the air, but that does not change the fact that they seem to occur more often in particular places at particular times.
At Tikal, at the top of the most energetic pyramid that we found down there, we took a lot of flash photos during the course of our 8-hour stakeouts, which would run from roughly 3 a.m. till 11 a.m. And on the pyramids that were electrically dead, that had no juice, nothing going on, which were the big fancy ones, but the most recently built ones, we would take photos and find out eventually when they were developed, no orbs, no glowing balls of light. But on the oldest pyramid down there, where we did work and got all kinds of results, that was 1,200 years older than the big fancier ones. In that case, the photography we got back from our own simple flash cameras, they were literally choking the screen with these balls at the period at which the air was highest in electrical charge. And on the strongest day down there, I was recording electrical charge higher than I've recorded even in thunderstorms back home. We don't know what orbs are, but our personal guess is that they're balls of ionized or electrified air that will tend to hang together. A good analogy would be ball lightning, where it's simply so electrified that the molecules are excited enough to glow.
Other evidence shows that there is energy occurring naturally everywhere on the planet that our science knows about but seems to ignore. Nikola Tesla sought to provide the world with free wireless electricity for everybody on Earth. He discovered that electricity occurred naturally throughout the Earth's atmosphere and ground. The telluric currents in the ground that John Burke discussed, and the electricity present in the ionosphere in the atmosphere, which is ionized by the sun, he also created and developed ways to harness those energies. Tesla wanted to harness the natural energy that exists everywhere on Earth and make it free to the public. Edison endeavored to produce and distribute electricity by creating a regulated monopoly for profit. Between 1901 and 1917, the Tesla Tower was built on Long Island as a wireless broadcasting system for telephone and electrical signals. Interestingly, it was constructed on an aquifer with descending passageways and tunnels beneath it. At the time, few understood how it worked. Tesla's funding was ultimately dropped by J.P. Morgan because Tesla wanted the wireless electricity to be free, and therefore J.P. Morgan couldn't make a profit. So even though Tesla's genius was seen by many, he was still driven into obscurity. The energy to create free wireless energy has always existed on our planet, and still exists today.